Now, civilians are also suffering in Sudan, where a brutal civil war rages on. The World Food Programme is scaling up efforts to distribute nutritional support, but warns that too many people there are still at risk of famine. UN officials say communities on the front lines are at breaking point. Look at these images, overwhelmed by displaced families in desperate need of aid. Giles Clark is a veteran photojournalist, and he's worked all over the world covering conflict and humanitarian crises. For 2 months, he travelled Sudan, capturing images like these to tell the human story of the war. And he's joining me right here on set to describe what he found. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you, Christiana.
You know, we don't hear very much about Sudan. It's almost like the forgotten war, as terrible as it is. You know, there were peaks of fighting where it seemed to dominate the news, but not much anymore. Just in a word or two, sum up what you found actually being there on the ground.
Well, I started in January 2025 in the more sort of eastern region where mass displacement, sort of 500,000 people had fled Khartoum state, and the sort of fighting had spread southern part of Khartoum and through sort of Sana'a and Wad Madani. So it's sort of these two waves of mass displacement happened in 23 and 24. So I focused first on that area in Kassala, which is only 30 kilometers from the Eritrean border.
Yeah.
But very much the sort of ground zero of mass displacement. So that's where I began.
I want to put up one of the pictures. We have a few of your pictures. There's so many, but we've chosen a few. Right. This is the baby who was born after a drone strike. And it's a dramatic picture. I mean, it's almost like the shaft of light is just focusing on that little being. And it's very, very little. And parents there, or the mum, trying to figure out what to do. What is the story behind the image?
Well, that's sort of unfortunately, it's sort of become a sort of almost daily issue in Sudan now. RSF attack the infrastructure
That's
plant.
the anti-government forces, right? The rapid support forces.
The rapid support forces, exactly. So
otherwise known, sorry, weren't they the Janjaweed in Darfur?
They were originally set up by Omar Bashir.
They were committing genocide in Darfur.
And they were set up as an anti-Arab sort of insurgency group. So they were born out of that. Mm-hmm. So in this particular image, it was a morning when we all woke up. I was in a compound about 50 miles away, and we were heading towards a sort of smaller town, New Haifa, and there was no power anywhere in the region. So this was a mother with a phone light. The baby had been born in a phone light. So there was no generators. Wow. A lot of the generators need diesel, and you know it's so. In these more rural regions, there's really they're sort of operating on literally nothing. You know?
There's that, and we don't know what's going to happen to that little child's life. But you also saw, some very malnourished children, very young children, and we're going to put a picture there. This is Renard, who's age 3, but she's suffering from acute malnutrition, and I don't know whether you'd know she was age 3. I mean, she looks much, much younger. One of hundreds of babies treated at a hospital that you went to. Tell me the scale of that particular issue, the starvation, the hunger.
Well, as opposed to the first image, this one was much more recent. This was towards the end of April. And it's a sort of after Khartoum was sort of liberated in terms of the fighting, the Sudanese army had forced out the RSF forces about 3 weeks before. So that sort of liberation sort of spiked a lot of people into wanting to get to the hospitals after having been trapped for no access. So this particular day I was there were up 100 very small, very malnourished, severely acute malnourished children in 3 wards, and that had been a 300% rise on the week before. So it was, it was really, and it was growing, and at the same time, the needs for that spike were not being met.
Well, and you mentioned when you took, I think you just said April, right?
Yes.
And you obviously noticed a difference between what was being delivered when you first got there in January and then in your next trip, because in that interim, Musk had taken his famous chainsaw to USAID, and that had a material impact immediately on life-sustaining food and help for people like Renard.
Well, particularly because originally, before Doge did his thing, there were sort of 1,400 community kitchens in and around the sort of the area of Khartoum and the wider states. That got cut down to about 90% of those got taken out, or maybe just under 90%. But that was providing food for really the population, because the infrastructure has been taken out, the power, any kind of refrigeration, any kind of transportation which relies on any sort of regular sort of service it just doesn't exist.
And you said, as USAID was being dismantled, you said it was panic, actually. The world humanitarian aid system collapsed overnight. Did people understand what was happening? Did they know that they had been beneficiaries of US aid and international aid, and that now it wasn't coming? Were they panicked?
Well, I was with UN OCHA and UNDP on that first
That's
trip.
the humanitarian organization.
Exactly. Yeah. I was supported by them, so I had a sort of inside view of just how that was going down in real time, which was very alarming. It still is, and it's. The whole country, the whole sort of. Tom Fletcher talked about this morning in the UN.
It's very articulate and evocative about all of this.
Extremely.
He's the head of UN humanitarian.
Exactly. Sorry, and the indifference and the impunity being shown towards the Sudan crisis is, it sounds sort of unforgivable at this point, because it's been going on. It continues to happen. A drone strike every 2 days on the infrastructure.
By the RSF.
Yeah. Yeah, the RSF were the ones who looted Khartoum, basically. They were there for 2 years. And that was what, that was where I wanted to see that with my own eyes. And I got to Khartoum, again, just a couple of weeks after that sort of the last of the fighting. And so, it's really a country that's sort of been strangled by this civil war. It's very difficult to put into words just how much trauma.
Yeah, and you see, as you're driving along, you took pictures of these graves by the roadside. It's just like so much death, and I guess just quickly dealing with it.
Well, exactly. This was something you just know. This is in South Omdurman. Bearing in mind, Khartoum itself is a massive city, and 75% of it, was just everybody fled with nothing, and most expected to come back. The ones that did stay had to put up with RSF intimidation, abuse, and just general civil war within the streets,
and a huge proportion of sexually related violence.
Yeah.
Tell me, were you able to sort of,
Well, certainly, yes, I did. I got to see that sort of firsthand in the displacement sites in Kassala, particularly Kassala.
You're saying all these names that I don't know where they are on the map.
Right. Well, it's where the mass went when they were displaced.
Right.
And these displacement camps had agencies set up that UNFPA, for instance, were doing a lot. The foreign program. They were all trying to help in some way with trauma counselling. Yeah. Local doctors were coming in. But yes, there's very visible.
Was it hard for you? You've been all over the world. How does this? You've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
How did this impact? How were you able to deal with all of this?
I do, I think that the thing is that once you're there, you realise that, first of all, getting there is really hard.
Yeah.
It's been blocked by, for most media since the beginning of the war in 2020.
They're also keeping the media out.
Yeah, well, it's because I had to wait 17 days in a hotel just to get my permits to leave Port Sudan, which is where you enter into Sudan. So it's a very tricky, long-winded process. The bureaucracy required to get to somewhere like Khartoum is it takes weeks once you land. So
once you land,
yeah,
wow.
Unless you're maybe with the UN agency.
Yeah.
But I realized that I had to get to the heart of this, and that's my thing. I mean, I'm focused on just trying to get to the story.
Yeah, and telling people around the world. You went to prisons, you saw all this kind of thing, but you also saw displaced people. We've just been talking about it in the Shiraz area. We're going to. Yeah, oh, sorry, this is
her name is Shiraz.
That's exactly right. She's 22 years old, and she's mute and deaf, displaced. She couldn't even hear the explosions. She told you, all I saw were terrified faces, bloody bodies in the streets, children among the dead, and armed men filled with rage. How did you meet her?
Okay, so this is really interesting. I mean, I was, again, in the town near the Eritrean border, way out east where all the displaced were, and I went to a school, a former school, with UN OCHA, the coordination outfit from the UN, and I realized that there were 400 families all around this school, but I realized there was a set of classrooms where they were just sort of, you just get drawn towards places, you know, and I went over and I met Dr. Tayseer, who spoke very good English, who came out of that classroom and invited me for tea. And then so it sort of went from there, really. I went in and I realized it was just women, and in the corner was Shiraz. And after a couple of days, she'd sort of, I mean, clearly she was different, you know. And then, of course, I found out that she had fled Khartoum. I mean, when she was 2 years old, she had had tonsillitis, basic tonsillitis, and they hadn't operated. So her adenoids had become, and then, you know, you lose that, you lose your voice. And then, of course, her hearing went.
Must be terrifying.
Yeah, and so when I got round to talking to her and realized that she'd fled Khartoum and she had left her hearing aid, so she had to go through this whole process of stepping over bodies and I mean, just complete
terrifying.
So
thank you.
Drawn to those stories.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing them to us. And we needed to tell these stories, so thanks for helping us do it. Giles Clark, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Christian.